Welcome to Dark Seduction Stories, where dangerous love, powerful obsessions, and romance that changes everything. Drop your location in the comments, and let's dive into tonight's tale. The wind screamed across the volcanic plateau like something wounded and furious. Dr. Lena Cross pressed her forehead against the van's cold window and watched the landscape turn increasingly hostile. Black sand stretched in every direction, punctuated by moss-covered lava fields that looked like the bones of some ancient creature breaking through dead skin. Iceland in November was a study in bleakness, and she'd chosen it specifically for that quality. 20 more minutes, the driver said in accented English. He was the third person she'd spoken to in 2 days, and she'd already forgotten his name. That was intentional too. She'd been running for 6 months. Not from the law, nothing so simple. From the whispers that followed her through the halls of the observatory in Chile, from the colleagues who'd once competed for her attention at conferences and now couldn't meet her eyes, from the truth of what she'd done and the lies she'd told to cover it. Dr. Marcus Hale's email had arrived like a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. A 6-month position studying Aurora borealis at a private research station. Isolated, asking no questions about her sudden departure from the Atacama Desert. The station materialized through the gloom like a ship on a dark sea. Low-slung buildings clustered together, their metal sides streaked with rust and ice. Solar panels and satellite dishes sprouted from the roofs at odd angles. Beyond the compound, she could see the dome of the observatory, its white surface already accumulating the season's first snow. The van crunched to a stop on the gravel lot. Before Lena could reach for her bag, the station door opened and a figure emerged. Dr. Marcus Hale was exactly as she remembered from the conference in Oslo 3 years ago. Tall, silver-haired, with the permanent squint of someone who'd spent decades staring at distant stars. He'd been kind to her then, when she was still just a promising postdoc with everything ahead of her. "Dr. Cross," he called, his voice nearly stolen by the wind. "Welcome to the edge of the world." She climbed out, and the cold hit her like a physical blow. The air tasted of snow and volcanic minerals. Hale gripped her hand firmly, his eyes searching her face with an intensity that made her wonder exactly how much he knew. "Thank you for the opportunity," she managed. "I know my departure from Chile was sudden. We all need fresh starts sometimes," he said, and something in his tone suggested he meant it. "Come inside. You'll meet the others." The station's interior was warmer, but no less austere. Narrow corridors lined with exposed pipes and humming electrical boxes. The walls were covered with maps, charts of magnetic field variations, and photographs of the Aurora in various stages of intensity. It smelled like coffee, ozone, and the peculiar staleness of recycled air. "We're small here," Hale explained as they walked. "Just 5 of us for the winter season. Dr. Sigurdsson handles the magnetometer data, Lou manages our satellite feeds, and Petra keeps us fed and the systems running. You'll be on the optical observation rotation, primarily night work." "And the 5th person?" Lena asked. Hale paused at a doorway. "Cade Morrison. He arrived 2 weeks ago. Photographer, technically, though he's been more interested in our work than his own. One of our donors wanted documentation of the station for publicity purposes. He'll be here through February." Something in the way Hale said it made Lena look at him more closely, but his expression was neutral. They entered what was clearly the common area, a large room with mismatched furniture, a kitchenette along one wall, and enormous windows that looked out onto the darkening plateau. 3 people looked up as they entered. Dr. Sigurdsson was a compact woman in her 50s. With steel-grey hair pulled into a practical bun. Liu, younger, barely looked up from his laptop. And Petra, the cook, offered a warm smile from where she was chopping vegetables. But it was the man standing by the window who held Lena's attention. Cade Morrison was tall, lean in the way of someone who moved through the world with deliberate efficiency. Dark hair fell across his forehead, and when he turned to look at her, his eyes were an unusual shade of grey-green that seemed to catch and hold the fading light. He was perhaps 37 or 38, with the kind of face that photographers themselves usually had. All angles and shadows, interesting rather than handsome. "Dr. Cross," he said, and his voice was low, textured. "I've been looking forward to meeting you." The way he said it sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. Not unpleasant, but definitely unsettling. There was something in his gaze that suggested he'd already studied her, already formed conclusions she wasn't privy to. "Mr. Morrison," she replied, keeping her voice professionally neutral. "Just Cade, please." He moved forward and extended his hand. When she took it, his grip was firm and warm, and he held on just a fraction longer than necessary. "Marcus tells me you're an expert in solar wind interactions. I'd love to pick your brain about the Aurora formation process. I'm sure you have more interesting subjects to photograph," she said, withdrawing her hand. His smile was slow, almost private. "I doubt that." The first week passed in a blur of orientation and adjustment. Lena learned the rhythms of the station, the morning meetings where they reviewed data and planned observations, the long hours alone in the observatory dome watching the sky, the quiet dinners where conversation was sparse and everyone seemed locked in their own thoughts. The darkness was nearly complete now, with only a few hours of twilight around noon. The isolation pressed in like a physical presence. She told herself that was why she noticed Cade so much. Limited options for observation. But the truth was more complicated. He had a way of appearing wherever she was. Not intrusively, he maintained a careful distance, always respectful of her space. But she'd turn from the observatory telescope and find him photographing the equipment. Or she'd be alone in the common room, reading, and he'd emerge from his quarters with a book of his own. They'd exchange pleasantries, nothing more. But there was always an undercurrent she couldn't name. He watched her. She felt it constantly. Not in a way that frightened her, though perhaps it should have. More like he was trying to memorize her, to understand something about her that she didn't understand herself. On her 8th night, the Aurora finally appeared in force. Lena was alone in the observatory when the sky erupted. Bands of green and violet light rippled across the darkness, folding and unfolding like silk in an invisible current. She'd seen the Aurora hundreds of times, but the sight never lost its power to make her breath catch. This was why she'd become an astronomer, for moments when the universe revealed its beauty with such casual magnificence. She was so absorbed in adjusting the spectrometer that she didn't hear the door open. "Incredible, isn't it?" She spun. Cade stood just inside the dome, his camera hanging around his neck. The Aurora's light played across his features, making him look almost otherworldly. "You shouldn't be in here during an active observation," she said. But there was no heat in it. "I know. I'm sorry." He didn't sound sorry. "I saw the display from my window and thought you might want company. Or not. I can leave." He made no move to go. Lena should have insisted. Maintaining observation protocols was crucial. But the truth was, she'd been alone for so many hours, and the station felt so remote, and there was something about his presence that made her feel less like a ghost, haunting her own life. "You can stay," she heard herself say. "Just don't touch anything." He moved closer and she caught his scent. Something clean and woody, cut with the metallic tang of cold air. They stood side by side, watching the sky perform its ancient dance. "What causes the different colors?" he asked after a while. She welcomed the familiar ground of science. Oxygen produces the green. Nitrogen gives you the blues and purples. It depends on the altitude of the collision and the energy of the particles. The sun throws off charged particles, and when they hit our atmosphere, they excite the atoms and molecules. When those atoms relax back to their ground state, they release photons. "Light, poetry, and physics," he murmured. She glanced at him. His profile was sharp against the dome's curve, and he was staring upward with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not wonder, exactly. Something more intense. "Why are you really here, Cade?" The question escaped before she could stop it. He turned to look at her, and the Aurora light made his eyes seem almost luminous. "What do you mean? This station is 4 hours from Reykjavik on a bad road. There's no cell service, limited internet, and the winter darkness is brutal. You could photograph the Aurora from anywhere in Iceland. Why come here?" For a long moment, he didn't answer. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the hum of the observatory equipment and the wind battering the dome. "Maybe I'm running from something too," he said finally, his voice so quiet she almost didn't hear it. Her heart kicked against her ribs. "What makes you think I'm running?" "I recognize it," he said. "The way you hold yourself apart. The way you flinch when anyone asks about your previous work. I've seen my own face in the mirror enough times to know the look." She should have been angry at his presumption. Instead, she felt a dangerous pull toward honesty. "I made a mistake," she said. "A bad one. And I'm trying to figure out if I can come back from it. Can you?" "I don't know yet." He moved closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body in the dome's chill. "For what it's worth," he said, "I think everyone deserves a second chance. Even those of us who probably don't deserve it." There was something raw in his voice. Something that spoke to the hollowness she'd been carrying inside herself for months. Without thinking, she reached out and touched his hand. Just briefly, a connection that lasted only seconds before she pulled away. But it was enough. Something shifted between them in that moment. Some invisible boundary crossed. "I should get back to the data," she said, though she didn't move. "Of course." He stepped back, creating proper distance again. "Thank you for letting me stay." He was halfway to the door when she called out, "Cade?" He turned. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked. "If the Aurora cooperates." His smile was slow and genuine. "I'd like that." After he left, Lena stood alone in the dome for a long time, watching the lights dance overhead. She told herself this was fine, that she was just making a friend in an isolated place, that the flutter in her chest meant nothing. But she was a scientist. She dealt in observable phenomena and measurable data, and the data suggested she was in trouble. The next 2 weeks fell into a pattern. Cade appeared most nights when she was on observatory duty, and they'd stand together watching the sky. Sometimes they talked about science, about photography, about the strange beauty of this isolated place. Sometimes they were silent, the quiet between them comfortable in a way that felt both natural and dangerous. She learned things about him in fragments. He'd grown up in the Pacific Northwest, moved around a lot as an adult. He'd been married once, briefly, when he was too young to know better. He had a sister he didn't talk to anymore. His father had died when he was 17. "What did he do?" Lena asked one night. "Your father?" Cade's expression shuttered instantly. "He was a researcher," he said after a pause. "Astrophysics, actually. Funny coincidence, right? Is that why you're interested in our work here?" "Maybe." He turned away, his jaw tight. He was brilliant. Also a drunk and a narcissist who made everyone around him miserable. Genius and monstrosity aren't mutually exclusive. The bitterness in his voice was sharp enough to cut. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "Don't be. It was a long time ago." But his hands were clenched at his sides, and she knew it wasn't nearly as distant as he pretended. She wanted to reach for him, to offer comfort, but something held her back. The careful distance they maintained felt necessary, a wall that kept them both safe from whatever was building between them. Dr. Hale noticed, of course. He was too observant not to. One afternoon, he found Lena in the library reviewing spectral data and closed the door behind him. "How are you settling in?" he asked, though his tone suggested this wasn't a casual check-in. "Fine," she said. "The work is exactly what I needed." He pulled up a chair across from her, his expression thoughtful. "I'm glad. You're doing excellent work, Lena. I knew you would. Thank you." "I wanted to talk to you about Cade," he said, and her stomach dropped. "What about him?" Hale studied her for a long moment. "I like him," he said finally. "He's intelligent, respectful, genuinely interested in the science. But I don't know him well, and neither do you. This place, it can do strange things to people's judgment. The isolation, the darkness. It amplifies things." "I'm not sure what you're implying," she said, though she knew exactly what he meant. "I'm saying be careful," Hale replied gently. "You came here to heal, not to complicate your life further. And there's something about him I can't quite figure out. Call it an old man's intuition, but I think he's carrying secrets heavier than either of us can guess." After he left, Lena sat alone in the library, watching snow begin to fall outside the window. Hale's words echoed in her mind, colliding with her own growing unease. Because he was right. She didn't really know Cade Morrison, and yet she was drawn to him in ways she couldn't explain or control, as if they were two objects caught in each other's gravitational pull, spiraling closer with every passing night. The question was whether they'd find orbit or collide. The storm hit on a Tuesday, 3 weeks into Lena's tenure. She woke to the sound of wind howling like something alive and furious, battering the station with enough force to make the metal walls groan. The windows were completely obscured by snow, turning the world outside into an impenetrable white void. At breakfast, Hale announced they were officially snowed in. Could be 3 days, could be a week, he said, his voice calm despite the building's tremors. "We have supplies, just stay inside and stay busy." Lena felt the walls closing in immediately. The station had felt isolated before, but this was different, a physical imprisonment that made her pulse quicken with something close to panic. She caught Cade's eyes across the table and saw her own tension reflected there, though his expression remained carefully neutral. By the second day, the proximity was wearing on everyone. Dr. Sigurdsson snapped at Liu over a trivial equipment error. Petra retreated to the kitchen and wouldn't come out except to serve meals. Hale spent hours in his office with the door closed, emerging only for mandatory gatherings. Lena tried to lose herself in data analysis, but her mind kept drifting. She was hyper-aware of Cade's presence in the station, could sense when he was near even before she saw him. It was unnerving, this connection that seemed to bypass rational thought entirely. On the third night, she couldn't sleep. The storm raged outside, and her small quarters felt suffocating. She pulled on a sweater and padded down the hallway to the common room, hoping some tea and solitude might settle her nerves. The room was dark except for the emergency lights casting everything in a dim red glow. She was halfway to the kitchen when she realized she wasn't alone. Cade sat in one of the chairs by the window, staring out at the storm-obscured night. A half-empty glass of whiskey sat on the table beside him. He turned when she entered, and the red light made his features look stark, almost dangerous. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked, his voice rougher than usual. "The storm," she said, though it was only partly true. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Join me, unless you'd rather be alone." She should have made tea and retreated to her quarters. Instead, she found herself crossing the room and sinking into the chair. The darkness felt intimate, confessional. "Want some?" He held up the whiskey bottle. "I probably shouldn't." "Neither should I." He poured her a glass anyway, and she took it. The whiskey burned going down, warmth spreading through her chest. Outside, the wind screamed, and snow pelted the windows like thrown sand. "Tell me about Chile," Cade said quietly. "What happened there?" Lena's first instinct was to deflect, to give him the sanitized version she'd told herself 100 times. But something about the darkness, the storm, the whiskey, loosened the words she'd been holding back. "I falsified data," she said. There it was, the truth she'd been running from. "Not maliciously. I thought I was correcting an error, smoothing out noise in the signal, but I was wrong. The noise was real, and what I published was compromised. By the time I realized it, 3 other teams had based their research on my findings." She took another sip of whiskey, feeling the shame wash over her fresh and hot despite the months that had passed. "I tried to retract it, to fix it, but the damage was done. I destroyed my credibility and wasted years of other people's work. The observatory asked me to resign. Everyone was very polite about it, very understanding, but I could see it in their eyes. I'd become someone you couldn't trust." The silence that followed felt enormous. She couldn't look at Cade, couldn't bear to see judgment in his face. "You know what the worst part is?" she continued, the words spilling out now that she'd started. "I still don't know if I did it on purpose. Part of me wanted so badly to be right, to make the discovery I'd been chasing for years. Did I convince myself the data was wrong because I wanted it to be? Was it honest mistake or unconscious fraud? I'll never know." When she finally looked up, Cade was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Not disgust, which she'd expected. Something softer, more complicated. "Thank you for telling me," he said. "Why?" The question came out sharper than she intended. "So you know what kind of person I am?" "So I know you're human," he replied. "So I know you hold yourself accountable even when it destroys you. That's not weakness, Lena. That's the opposite." Something in her chest cracked at his words. She'd expected condemnation and found understanding instead, and it undid her in ways she hadn't anticipated. "Your turn," she said, her voice rough. "What are you running from?" He looked down at his whiskey glass, swirling the amber liquid. For a long moment she thought he wouldn't answer. "Expectations," he said finally. "My father's legacy, the person everyone thought I should become." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. He was brilliant, like I said, made significant contributions to stellar nucleosynthesis theory. Everyone expected me to follow in his footsteps, to be just like him. But I didn't want to be like him. I couldn't, because of the drinking, because of everything. His jaw was tight. The drinking, the affairs, the way he treated my mother like she was an inconvenience to his genius. He had this theory that brilliant minds operated by different rules, that ordinary morality was a cage for exceptional people. He lived that way, and it destroyed everyone around him. Lena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm. How did he die? Cade's expression went very still. "Suicide," he said quietly. "Pills and alcohol." Left a note that was just equations, some problem he'd been working on. Not a word for my mother or me or my sister, just math. "Cade, I'm so sorry." He shook his head. "It was a long time ago. I'm over it." But he wasn't. She could see it in every line of his body, the tension he carried like armor. The wounds his father had left weren't healed, just buried deep. Without thinking, she reached across the space between them and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers immediately, desperate and tight. "We're quite a pair, aren't we?" she said softly. "Both running from our ghosts. Maybe that's why this feels..." He trailed off, searching for the word. "Inevitable," she finished. His eyes met hers, and the intensity in them stole her breath. "Yes." The air between them felt charged, electric. He was still holding her hand, his thumb tracing small circles on her palm that sent shivers up her arm. She knew she should pull away, maintain the careful distance they'd been preserving, but she didn't want to. She wanted to lean forward and close the gap between them. She wanted to know what his mouth would feel like against hers, whether the hunger she saw in his eyes matched her own. "Lena," he said, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer and a warning combined. "I should tell you something." Her heart was hammering now. "What?" He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Something flickered across his face, conflict, pain, something she couldn't name. I'm not who you think I am." A door slammed somewhere in the station and they both jumped. The moment shattered like glass. Cade pulled his hand back and Lena felt the loss of contact like a physical ache. They sat in charged silence, both breathing too hard, the weight of what almost happened hanging between them. "I should go," she said, standing abruptly. "It's late." "Lena, wait." But she was already moving toward the door, her heart racing, her mind a chaos of want and confusion and fear. What had he been about to say? What did he mean? He wasn't who she thought he was. In her quarters, she lay awake for hours, listening to the storm and replaying every moment of their conversation. The warmth of his hand in hers, the raw pain in his voice when he spoke about his father, the way he'd looked at her like she was something precious and dangerous all at once. She was in trouble, deep, complicated trouble, and she had no idea how much worse it was about to get. The storm broke on the 4th day, leaving the station buried under 3 feet of snow. The sky cleared to a brilliant, painful blue, and everyone emerged from their hibernation blinking and irritable. Lena threw herself into work with renewed intensity, trying to avoid both Cade and her own thoughts. But avoidance proved impossible in such close quarters. She saw him at meals, in the hallways, through the observatory dome window as she worked. Each time, their eyes would meet, and she'd feel that same electric pull. He'd look like he wanted to say something, then think better of it, and turn away. A week after the storm, Hale called her into his office. "I've been reviewing your spectral data," he he said without preamble. It's excellent work, Lena. Really exceptional. I'd like to co-author a paper with you if you're interested. It might help with the professional rehabilitation you're looking for. Relief flooded through her. I'd be honored. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. There's something else I need to discuss. Her stomach tightened. I did some checking on Cade Morrison, Hale continued, his expression troubled. His credentials as a photographer are legitimate, and his portfolio is impressive. But there are gaps in his history, years where I can't find any record of what he was doing or where he was. That bothers me. Why are you telling me this? Lena asked, though she knew. Because I see the way you look at each other, Hale said bluntly. And I care about you, Lena. You've been through enough. I don't want to see you hurt by someone who might not be what he seems. Have you asked him about the gaps? I tried. He was evasive. Hale leaned back in his chair, studying her. I'm not saying he's dangerous. I'm saying be careful. People who hide their pasts usually have good reasons. After she left his office, Lena stood in the hallway feeling unmoored. What did she really know about Cade? A dead father, a troubled childhood, a mysterious present. The intensity between them that felt both inevitable and terrifying. She found him in the common room that evening, working on his laptop. When she approached, he looked up with an expression that was equal parts hope and wariness. Can we talk? She asked. Of course. He closed the laptop and gave her his full attention. She sat across from him, choosing her words carefully. The other night, you said you weren't who I thought you were. What did you mean? His expression shuttered immediately. Lena. No, don't deflect. I told you my deepest shame, and you owe me honesty. She leaned forward, keeping her voice low but firm. Who are you, Cade? Really? For a long moment, he just looked at her. She could see the conflict playing out behind his eyes, some internal war being waged. I'm exactly who I said I am, he said finally. A photographer, someone trying to outrun his past. But you're right that there are things I haven't told you. What things? He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration she was coming to recognize. Before I became a photographer, I worked in corporate intelligence, background checks, asset verification, that sort of thing. Nothing illegal, but not exactly noble either. I dug up people's secrets for a living. Lena felt something cold settle in her stomach. Why did you stop? Because I hated who it was turning me into, he said quietly. I hated the person I saw in the mirror, so I walked away, changed careers, tried to become someone better. It made a certain kind of sense, she realized. The way he watched people, the intensity of his attention. He'd been trained to observe, to analyze, to see beneath surfaces. Is that why you're really here? She asked. Because of something you found out about this station? No. He reached across the table and took her hand, his grip almost desperate. I'm here because I needed to get away from that life, and this seemed like the edge of the world. Meeting you, that was pure chance. The best kind of chance. She wanted to believe him. More than that, she realized she did believe him. Whatever else Cade Morrison was hiding, his feelings for her felt genuine. Okay, she said softly. Okay, I believe you. She turned her hand over, lacing her fingers through his. We all have pasts we're not proud of. That's why we're here, right? Trying to be better than we were. The relief on his face was palpable. Thank you, he said. And then, so quietly she almost missed it. I don't deserve you. Neither of us deserves anything, she replied. We just get what we get and try to make it mean something. That night, for the first time since arriving at the station, she slept soundly. The confession had cleared the air between them, made things feel possible again. She had no idea that Cade lay awake in his own quarters, staring at the ceiling and hating himself more than he ever had before, because he hadn't told her the whole truth, not even close. 2 weeks before Christmas, the Aurora returned with spectacular intensity. Lena was in the observatory, running a full spectral analysis when Cade appeared in the doorway, exactly as he had that first night. But this time, there was no hesitation. He crossed to where she stood at the telescope, and she turned to face him. The Aurora light painted them both in shades of green and violet, turning the moment surreal and dreamlike. "I've been thinking about you constantly," he said, his voice low. "Every minute of every day, it's driving me insane." "Good," she replied, her heart racing. "Because I can't stop thinking about you either." He moved closer, close enough that she could feel his breath on her face. "Tell me to leave," he whispered. "Tell me this is a bad idea, and I'll go." Instead, she reached up and pulled him down to her. The kiss was everything she'd imagined, and nothing like it at the same time. Hungry and desperate, like they were both drowning and had found the only air in the world in each other's mouths. His hands came up to frame her face, gentle despite the intensity, and she felt something in her chest crack wide open. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to hers. "I'm falling for you," he said. "I know it's too fast. I know it's complicated, but I can't help it." "Then don't help it," she said. "Fall." Above them, the Aurora danced and swirled, ancient and indifferent to the small human dramas playing out beneath its light. Lena thought about solar wind and magnetic fields, about particles colliding and releasing energy, about the physics of attraction and connection. Some forces, she knew, were simply too powerful to resist, even when they would destroy you. The next 3 weeks existed in a suspended reality that felt both dangerous and intoxicating. Lena and Cade fell into a rhythm of stolen moments, late-night conversations in the observatory, hands brushing during dinner, kisses in dark hallways when no one else was around. They were careful, discreet, but Lena knew the others suspected. She could see it in the way Hale watched them, the knowing smile Petra tried to hide, the pointed look Sigurdsson gave them at meals. She didn't care. For the first time in months, she felt alive instead of merely existing. Cade really saw her in ways no one else ever had. He understood the guilt she carried, the weight of her failure, and he didn't judge her for it. With him, she could breathe. But there were moments when she'd catch him staring at her with an expression she couldn't read, something between longing and anguish. When she'd ask what he was thinking, he'd shake his head and pull her close, burying his face in her hair like he was trying to memorize her scent. "Promise me something," he said one night as they lay together on the observatory floor, watching the Aurora through the dome. "What?" "That you'll remember I never meant to hurt you, no matter what happens." She propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him. The Aurora light cast strange shadows across his face, making him look almost haunted. "Why would you hurt me?" "I wouldn't. I won't. I just..." He reached up and touched her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. Sometimes the truth hurts people even when we don't want it to. A chill ran through her despite the warmth of his touch. "What truth?" "Nothing. Forget I said anything." He pulled her down for a kiss that tasted of desperation, and she let herself get lost in it, rather than pressing for answers she wasn't sure she wanted. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in January. Lena was in her quarters organizing data files when her laptop pinged with an email notification. It was from an old colleague at the Chilean observatory, someone she hadn't spoken to since her resignation. Her finger hovered over the delete button, but curiosity won out. The email was brief. "Lena, I hope Iceland is treating you well. I wanted you to know that someone has been asking questions about you. A private investigator, I think, though he claimed to be a journalist. He wanted to know about your work here, your departure, where you went. I didn't tell him anything, but I thought you should know. Be careful. Miguel." Her blood went cold. Someone was looking for her. But who? And why? She read the email 3 more times, each pass making her more paranoid. The timing was suspicious. She'd been in Iceland for almost 2 months now, and only now someone was tracking her movements. Unless they'd known where she was all along and were just gathering information. Her mind raced through possibilities. A journalist writing about scientific misconduct. Someone from the university pursuing legal action. But the Chilean observatory had been careful to keep everything quiet, precisely to avoid scandal. She needed to talk to Hale. She found him in his office, surrounded by papers and looking exhausted. When she showed him the email, his expression darkened. "I was afraid of something like this," he said quietly. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then sighed heavily. Lena, there's something I need to tell you about Cade. Her stomach dropped. What about him? I did more digging after our last conversation. Called in some favors, reached out to contacts in the States. Those gaps in his employment history? They line up with periods when he was working for a firm that specializes in corporate espionage and asset recovery. High-end stuff, very discreet, often ethically questionable. He told me about that, Lena said, though her voice sounded uncertain even to her own ears. He said he walked away from it. Did he tell you he was still working for them until 6 months ago? Hale's voice was gentle but firm. Or that his last known assignment involved locating a witness who disappeared after testifying against a tech executive. The room seemed to tilt. No. I don't know if there's a connection to you, Hale continued, but the timing is suspicious. You leave Chile, someone starts asking questions, and Cade Morrison, a man with a very specific skill set, shows up at the same remote research station where you're hiding. That's a lot of coincidences. Lena felt like she might be sick. You think he's here because of me? That someone hired him to find me? I think it's possible, Hale said carefully. I hope I'm wrong, but you need to consider it. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I need to talk to him. Lena, wait. But she was already moving, striding down the hallway with her pulse hammering in her ears. Everything Hale had said made a terrible kind of sense. The way Cade had appeared in her life, the intensity of his interest, those moments when he looked at her like he was memorizing evidence. How could she have been so stupid? She found him in his quarters, packing a camera bag. He looked up when she burst in, and something in her expression made his face go pale. Lena, is it true? Her voice shook with barely controlled fury. Are you here because someone hired you to find me? The silence that followed was answer enough. Let me explain. Explain what? That everything between us was a lie? That you've been manipulating me this whole time? Were you documenting everything? Recording our conversations? Taking notes on my emotional breakdown so you could sell it to whoever's paying you? No, Lena, no. It wasn't like that. He moved toward her, but she held up a hand, stopping him cold. Don't touch me, she said, her voice like ice. Don't you dare touch me. Please just listen. Yes, I was hired to find you. A law firm in Santiago wanted to locate you for a deposition. Something about a lawsuit related to the research contamination. It was just a job, nothing sinister. I tracked you here, and I was supposed to confirm your location and report back. He ran a hand through his hair, his expression anguished. But then I met you, and everything changed. Everything changed? She laughed, a bitter sound. You mean you realized you could get closer to me by playing the damaged, sympathetic stranger? Was any of it real? Your father? The corporate intelligence background? Or was it all just a cover story designed to make me trust you? It was all real, he said desperately. Every word I told you about my father, about my past. It was true. And my feelings for you, Lena, my feelings are real. I fell in love with you. That's why I never reported your location. That's why I've been stalling the firm, telling them I'm still searching. I couldn't do it. I couldn't betray you. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe him so badly it physically hurt. But how could she? How could she trust anything he said when their entire relationship was built on deception? Get out, she said quietly. Lena, please. Get out of this station. Tonight. I'll have Petra radio for a pickup. I don't care if there's a storm coming. I don't care if it's inconvenient. I want you gone. His face crumpled. I know you hate me right now, and you have every right to. But please believe me when I say I never wanted to hurt you. What we had, what we have, it's the most real thing in my life. You don't have the right to say that to me, she said, her voice breaking. You lost that right the moment you lied. She turned and left before the tears could fall, before he could see just how thoroughly he'd destroyed her. In her quarters, she finally let herself fall apart. Great, racking sobs that shook her entire body. She'd been such a fool. She'd let herself believe that someone could see her failures and love her anyway, that she could have a fresh start, that redemption was possible. But it had all been a performance, a job, a means to an end. The worst part, was that a traitorous piece of her heart still wanted to believe him, still wanted to think that what they'd shared had been real, despite everything. Someone knocked on her door an hour later. She ignored it. "Lena, it's Marcus. Can I come in?" She wiped her face and opened the door. Hale took one look at her, and his expression softened with concern. "I'm sorry," he said. "I wish I'd been wrong." "Did he leave?" "Not yet. There's a storm moving in a bad one. It's not safe to have anyone try to reach us tonight. He'll have to wait until morning." She nodded numbly. One more night. She could survive one more night. "There's something else," Hale said, his tone careful. "I found something in my research that I didn't mention earlier, about Cade's father." "I don't want to hear it," she said automatically. "I think you need to." His father's name was Dr. Richard Morrison. He was an astrophysicist, specialized in stellar nucleosynthesis, exactly as Cade said. He also had a reputation for being brilliant and difficult. Hale paused, his expression troubled. But that's not the interesting part. What's interesting is that 28 years ago, Dr. Morrison had an affair with a graduate student named Lena Cross. "Your mother." The world stopped. "What?" The word came out as barely a whisper. "Your mother worked at the same university where Morrison taught." Hale continued gently. "She was completing her doctorate when they had their affair. It only lasted a few months. Morrison was married, and when your mother got pregnant, he wanted nothing to do with it. She left the program, moved back to her hometown, and raised you alone. You've always known your father abandoned you before you were born, but you never knew who he was." Lena couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The room was spinning, and she grabbed the door frame for support. "Cade Morrison is your half-brother, Lena," Hale said, his voice infinitely sad. "And based on the timeline, I think he's known since before he arrived here." No. How is that possible?" she managed. "How could he know? He worked in corporate intelligence, Lena. He knows how to dig up information most people never find. I'm guessing he discovered the connection when he was hired to locate you. Maybe that's even why he took the job in the first place, to find his father's secret daughter." The implications crashed over her in waves. Cade had known they were related. He'd known, and he'd pursued her anyway. He'd kissed her, touched her, told her he was falling in love with her. What kind of person did that? "I'm going to be sick," she said, and she was, barely making it to the bathroom in time. When she emerged, shaking and pale, Hale was still there. He helped her to the bed and sat beside her, his presence steady and grounding. "I need you to stay away from him," he said firmly. "Whatever his reasons, whatever his intentions, this situation is toxic. He'll be gone in the morning, and you can begin to process this." But Lena barely heard him. Her mind was racing through every conversation, every touch, every moment she'd spent with Cade. The way he'd looked at her that first night in the observatory, the questions about her father she'd never answered because she didn't know the answers herself, his intensity, his obsession, the way he'd said he was falling for her like it was inevitable. He'd been searching for something in her, some trace of their father perhaps, some way to understand the man who'd destroyed both their families, and she'd given him everything. "I need to talk to him," she said suddenly. "Lena, I don't think that's wise. I need to hear it from him," she insisted, standing on shaky legs. "I need to know why. I need to understand what he was thinking." Hale looked like he wanted to argue, but he must have seen something in her face that told him it was pointless. "Do you want me to come with you?" "No," she said. "This is something I need to do alone." She found Cade in the common room, staring out at the gathering storm. He turned when she entered, and the hope in his eyes died when he saw her expression. "I know," he said quietly. "Hale told you. Did you know?" Her voice was eerily calm. "Before you came here, did you know we were related?" He closed his eyes, and that was answer enough. "Yes." "How long?" "I found out about you 3 years ago," he said, his voice hollow. "I was doing research on my father after my mother died, trying to understand who he really was. I discovered the affair, found your mother's name, tracked you down. I've been following your career from a distance ever since. When the firm hired me to find you, I saw it as fate, a chance to finally meet you." Lena felt like she was going to shatter into 1,000 pieces. So, you came here and you… what? Decided to seduce your half-sister? Was it some kind of sick game? No. Damn no. Lena, you have to understand. Understand what? Her voice rose, cracking with emotion. That you knew we shared a father and you kissed me anyway. That you let me fall for you knowing it was wrong. That you touched me, held me, told me you loved me, all while carrying this secret. I didn't plan for any of this to happen, he said desperately. I came here to meet you, to understand you, maybe to tell you the truth about our father. But then I saw you, and you were so… He stopped, struggling for words. You were brilliant and broken and trying so hard to be better. You were everything I wished I could be. And I fell for you before I could stop myself. You should have stopped yourself, she said, tears streaming down her face now. You should have told me the truth. I tried. So many times I tried. But I was terrified of losing you. And I kept telling myself that maybe it didn't matter. That biology was just biology. That what we felt was real, regardless of DNA. He moved toward her, his expression anguished. I love you, Lena. I know I have no right to. I know it's wrong, but I do. That's the one true thing in all of this. She backed away from him, shaking her head. Don't say that. Don't you dare say that to me. What you feel isn't love. It's obsession. It's some twisted need to connect with a father who destroyed us both. I'm not a person to you. I'm a mirror, a way to understand yourself. That's not true, he said, but his voice was weak. Isn't it? She laughed bitterly. Get out, Cade. Leave tonight. Storm or no storm. I can't look at you anymore. Please, go, she screamed, and the word echoed through the empty station. He stared at her for one long, terrible moment, his face a mask of grief. Then he turned and walked away, leaving her alone in the common room with her shattered heart and the howling wind outside. She sank to the floor and wept until she had nothing left. Lena didn't sleep that night. She lay in her bed, listening to the storm rage outside, her mind cycling through every interaction with Cade, recontextualizing each moment with this new, horrible knowledge. Every tender word became manipulation. Every kiss became violation. Every time he'd looked at her with that intense focus, he'd been searching for traces of their father in her face. The thought made her physically ill. Around 3 a.m, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Heavy, deliberate. They paused outside her door, and she held her breath, praying he wouldn't knock. After a long moment, the footsteps continued toward the exit. She heard the outer door open and close, and then there was only the wind. He'd left. Despite the storm, despite the danger, he'd actually left. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt hollowed out, scraped clean of everything she'd once been. Morning came grey and brutal. The storm had passed, leaving the world buried under fresh snow that sparkled with cruel beauty in the weak sunlight. Lena forced herself to the common room for breakfast, knowing everyone would have questions. Hale was already there, along with Sigurdsson and Liu. Petra emerged from the kitchen with coffee, her expression sympathetic. They all knew. Of course they did. In a place this small, secrets were impossible. He's gone, Hale said quietly. Left around 3 this morning. Took the emergency snowmobile. It's a 4-hour drive to the main road in good conditions in this weather, probably 6 or 7. If he made it. If? Lena asked, and hated herself for caring. The visibility was terrible, Sigurdsson said, her tone carefully neutral. Temperatures well below 0. It was foolish to attempt it alone. Lena felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. She'd told him to leave. She'd screamed at him to go, storm or no storm. If he'd died out there in the snow, it would be her fault. We should try to reach him, she heard herself say. We can't, Hale replied. The other snowmobile is being serviced, and the roads won't be passable for at least another day. If he's in trouble, he'll have to manage on his own. There's an emergency shelter about halfway to the main road if he was smart. He'd have stopped there. The day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Lena tried to work, but the data swam before her eyes, meaningless. She kept imagining Cade lost in the snow, the cold creeping into his bones, dying alone because she'd sent him away. By evening, Hale managed to get through to the local emergency services. Cade Morrison had been picked up at the main road junction around noon, cold and exhausted, but alive. He'd caught a bus south to Reykjavik. He was gone. Lena told herself she was relieved. She told herself this was what she wanted. But that night, alone in her quarters, she cried until her ribs ached. The next 2 weeks were a special kind of torture. She moved through her days like a ghost, performing her duties mechanically, while her mind replayed endless loops of memory and regret. The station felt emptier without him, haunted by his absence. She'd catch herself looking up when someone entered a room, expecting to see him. At night, she'd wake reaching for a warmth that wasn't there. Hale tried to help. He spent hours with her, reviewing data, discussing their paper, offering silent companionship when words felt impossible. He never said, "I told you so," never made her feel foolish for falling for Cade's deception. For that, she was grateful. "You know," he said one evening as they worked side by side in the library, "what he did was unconscionable, but I don't think he was lying about his feelings." Lena looked up sharply. "Don't." "I'm not defending him," Hale continued carefully. "What he did was wrong on every level, but I saw the way he looked at you. That kind of devotion obsession, maybe it's not something you can fake. I think he genuinely believed he loved you, twisted as that love was. That doesn't make it better," she said, her voice tight. "It makes it worse. He knew it was wrong and did it anyway because his need was more important than my well-being. That's not love, Marcus. That's narcissism. Just like our father." Hale nodded slowly. "You're probably right. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree." The thought chilled her. Was she like their father too? Capable of destroying people through selfishness disguised as brilliance? She'd already proven she could compromise her integrity when desperate enough. What other sins was she capable of? 3 weeks after Cade's departure, a package arrived at the station. It was addressed to Lena in handwriting she recognized immediately, and her hands shook as she opened it in the privacy of her quarters. Inside was a flash drive and a handwritten letter. She almost threw both away without looking. Almost. But some self-destructive part of her needed to know what he had to say. The letter was short. "Lena, I know you never want to hear from me again, and I respect that. I'm not asking for forgiveness, I don't deserve it. But I need you to know the truth about why I came to Iceland. The flash drive contains my research on our father. Everything I found over 3 years of searching. I thought if I understood him, I could understand myself. Then I found out about you. And I thought if I understood you, I could understand us both. I was wrong. All I did was hurt the one person who might have understood what it's like to be his child. I've told the law firm I couldn't locate you. They've closed the case. You're safe. I hope Iceland gives you the peace I stole from you. I hope someday you can forgive me, though I never will. Cade." She sat holding the letter for a long time, tears sliding down her cheeks. Then she plugged in the flash drive. It was all there. Academic papers, journal entries, photographs, medical records. The complete history of Dr. Richard Morrison's brilliant, destructive life. His groundbreaking work on stellar nucleosynthesis. His alcoholism, his affairs. The trail of broken people he'd left in his wake. And there, buried in a folder labeled Elena, was everything Cade had found about her mother. The affair, the pregnancy, the way Morrison had dismissed her, offered her money for an abortion, threatened to ruin her career if she told anyone. Her mother had been 24, brilliant, her whole future ahead of her. Morrison had destroyed that future without a second thought. Lena read until her eyes burned, absorbing every detail of the father she'd never known. The man whose genetic legacy she carried. The man whose capacity for harm had apparently passed to his son. At the bottom of the folder was a video file. She almost didn't click it, but curiosity won out. The screen showed a young man barely 18 with Cade's features, but softer, not yet hardened by time and pain. He was speaking to the camera, his voice shaking. "Dad killed himself 3 days ago. I found him. Pills and scotch, like he was mixing a cocktail. Mum keeps saying it's not our fault, but I know better. He left a note that was just equations, like even in death, the work mattered more than we did. I thought I'd feel sad, but all I feel is angry. Angry that he wasted his brilliance on cruelty. Angry that I have his face, his mind, maybe his sickness too. I'm terrified I'll become him, that I'll hurt people the way he did. How do you escape your own DNA? The video ended, and Lena sat in silence, understanding finally clicking into place. Cade hadn't been trying to seduce her out of twisted desire. He'd been trying to save himself. He'd seen in her another person wrestling with their father's legacy, someone who might understand the fear that you were destined to repeat your parents' sins. And in his desperation for connection, for understanding, he'd convinced himself that what they had was love rather than shared trauma. It didn't excuse what he'd done, but it explained it. And somehow that made everything worse, because now she couldn't hate him cleanly. Now she understood him. And understanding bred a complicated mix of grief and fury and unwanted compassion. She spent the next 2 days in her quarters, emerging only for food and necessary station duties. Hale checked on her regularly, but respected her need for space. The others gave her wide berth, their expressions sympathetic but helpless. On the 3rd day, she made a decision. She opened her laptop and began to write. Not a response to Cade, she had nothing to say to him that wouldn't just deepen both their wounds. Instead, she wrote about her own failure in Chile, about the choices that had led her here, about inheriting brilliance and weakness from a father who'd valued only the former. She wrote about legacy and choice, about whether we were doomed to repeat our parents' mistakes or capable of breaking the cycle, about learning to forgive yourself while still holding yourself accountable. It took her a week to finish. When she showed it to Hale, he read it in silence, then looked at her with something like pride. "This is brave," he said, "and important. You should publish it." "It's too personal," she protested. "That's why it needs to be published," he replied. "Science needs more honesty about failure, about the human cost of the work we do. This could help people." She thought about Cade's young face on that video, asking how to escape your own DNA. Thought about all the other people carrying their parents' sins like stones. Maybe Hale was right. Maybe her failure could serve some purpose beyond her own suffering. "Okay," she said, "I'll submit it." That night, for the first time since Cade left, she felt something other than pain. Not happiness, she was far from that, but maybe the beginning of acceptance. She stood at the observatory window, watching the Aurora dance across the sky. Somewhere out there, Cade was watching the same sky, carrying the same wounds. She hoped he found his peace eventually. She hoped they both did. But she knew some wounds never fully healed. They just became part of who you were. Scars that told the story of your survival. And sometimes, survival was enough. Spring came to Iceland slowly, reluctantly. The endless darkness retreated inch by inch, replaced by twilight, and then finally, brief bursts of actual sunlight. Lena's 6-month contract was coming to an end, and she had decisions to make about her future. Her essay had been published in a prestigious journal, sparking conversations about scientific integrity and the pressure to succeed. Several universities had reached out, tentatively offering research positions. The Chilean Observatory had even sent a formal letter acknowledging her honesty and courage. It wasn't redemption, not quite, but it was a beginning. She and Hale had submitted their joint paper on Aurora spectral analysis, and it was receiving excellent peer reviews. Her work here had been good, better than good. She'd proven to herself that she could still do science with integrity, but she couldn't stop thinking about Cade. Late at night, she'd replay their conversations, re-examine the moments she'd thought were genuine connection. The rational part of her brain knew what he'd done was unforgivable. The irrational part, the part that had fallen for him, whispered that maybe, just maybe, there was a way to understand it without condoning it. On her last night at the station, Petra organized a small farewell dinner. It was warm and bittersweet, full of laughter and promises to stay in touch. These people had saved her in ways they'd never fully understand. After dinner, Hale pulled her aside. "I have something to tell you," he said, his expression troubled. "Something I should have mentioned earlier, but I wasn't sure how you'd take it." Lena's stomach tightened. What is it? When I was doing research on your father on Dr. Morrison, I found something in the university archives that didn't make it into Cade's files. Your mother wasn't the only graduate student Morrison had an affair with. There was another woman, 2 years earlier. She also got pregnant. She also left the program. The room seemed to tilt. What are you saying? I'm saying you and Cade might not be the only ones. Morrison was prolific in more ways than one. There could be other half-siblings out there, other people carrying his legacy without knowing it. Hale paused, choosing his words carefully. I thought you should know before you leave, in case you ever want to search for them. Lena sat down heavily. The implications were staggering. How many lives had Richard Morrison damaged? How many children had grown up without fathers, inheriting brilliance and trauma in equal measure? Does Cade know? I don't think so. This information wasn't easy to find. It took me weeks of digging through old records. But Lena, Hale hesitated. What if that's why he was so obsessed with understanding Morrison? What if on some level, he suspected there were more of you? The thought sent chills down her spine. Had Cade been searching for a family that didn't exist, trying to build connections with people who shared his blood because he couldn't connect with anyone else? I need to tell him, she said suddenly. Are you sure that's wise? No, she admitted, but it feels necessary. He deserves to know he's not alone in this. Even if we can never... She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. That night, she composed an email. She wrote and deleted it 17 times before finally settling on something that felt true. Cade, Dr. Hale found evidence that we're not alone. Our father had other affairs, other children he abandoned. I thought you should know. Not because it changes anything between us, it doesn't, but because you spent years searching for answers about him, and this is part of that answer. He was systematically destructive. It wasn't personal. He destroyed everyone. I hope that brings you some peace, though I know it probably won't. I've accepted a position at Oslo University starting in the fall. I'm going to keep working, keep trying to be better than our father was. I hope you're doing the same. Take care of yourself. Lena. She hit send before she could reconsider, then closed her laptop and tried not to think about whether he'd respond. 2 days later, as she was packing to leave the station, her phone buzzed with a message. Unknown number. Thank you for telling me. I did some digging based on Hale's information, found 3 more, 2 half-sisters and a brother. All of us scattered, all of us damaged in different ways. You were right that it doesn't change anything between us, but it helps to know I'm not the only monster he created. I hope Oslo treats you well. I hope you find the peace you deserve. I won't contact you again. C. Lena stared at the message for a long time, her emotions a tangled knot she couldn't begin to unravel. Relief that he'd found others like them, sadness that their connection could never be anything but poisoned. And underneath it all, a stubborn, irrational ache that wouldn't quite fade. She deleted the message and finished packing. 3 months later, settled into her new office at Oslo University, Lena received a package. No return address, but she knew immediately who it was from. Inside was a photograph. It showed 5 people standing together on a grey beach Cade, and 4 others who shared subtle variations of the same features. Morrison's children, finally united. They weren't touching, weren't smiling, but there was something powerful in their proximity. A chosen family forged from shared damage. Tucked behind the photograph was a note in Cade's handwriting. We're meeting quarterly. Therapy, mostly. Trying to break the cycle. You should join us if you ever want to. No pressure. Just an open door. Lena pinned the photograph to her office wall, next to her framed paper on Aurora spectroscopy. She stared at Cade's face, at the other faces that could have been hers in different circumstances. A family she'd never known she wanted, built on the ruins of their father's destruction. She told herself she'd never contact them. That door needed to stay closed. But 6 months later, when the darkness of Norwegian winter pressed in and the loneliness became unbearable, she found herself composing an email to the address Cade had included with the photo. I'd like to come to the next meeting, she wrote. If the offer still stands. The response came within an hour. It does. We meet in Copenhagen next month. I'll send details. Glad you're coming. We've been waiting for you. The meeting was held in a small therapy office overlooking the harbour. Lena arrived early, her nerves jangling. The others filtered in one by one, 3 women and 2 men, all carrying Morrison's ghost in their features. Cade came in last, and when their eyes met, something passed between them that was too complicated to name. The therapist, a calm woman named Dr. Jensen, guided them through introductions and ground rules. This was a safe space. No judgment, no expectations. Just 6 people trying to understand the legacy they'd inherited and how to move beyond it. They went around the circle sharing their stories. Each one was different but fundamentally the same. Abandonment, brilliance, the fear of becoming the monster who made them. When it was Lena's turn, she spoke about Chile, about Iceland, about learning to forgive herself while still holding herself accountable. She didn't mention Cade specifically, and he didn't mention her, but she felt his eyes on her the entire time, that same intense focus that had drawn her to him in the first place. After the session, they all went to dinner together. It was strange and wonderful and painful all at once, this instant family that shouldn't exist, bonded by trauma they never asked for. Lena found herself laughing at a joke one of the sisters made, then catching Cade's eye across the table and seeing her own complicated joy reflected there. He walked her back to her hotel afterward, maintaining careful distance between them. "I'm glad you came," he said as they reached the entrance. "Me too," she admitted. "It's strange, but it helps. Being around people who understand." "Yeah." He shoved his hands in his pockets, looking uncomfortable. "Lena, I know I've said this before, but I need you to know I'm sorry. Not just for what I did, but for the position it put you in. You deserved honesty from the beginning, and I robbed you of that choice." "I know," she said quietly, "and I'm working on forgiving you. But Cade, we can never go back to what we were. You know that, right? Even if we weren't related, even if none of that mattered, the betrayal is too deep. I can be your sister in this weird, broken way, but I can't be anything more." Something flickered across his face, grief, acceptance, maybe both. "I know," he said. "I just want you in my life in whatever way you can be. This family we're building, it's the first real thing I've had in years." "Me too," she said, and meant it. They stood in awkward silence for a moment, then Cade surprised her by pulling her into a brief, careful hug. It felt different than before, platonic, familial, safe in a way their previous touches never had been. "Good night, Lena," he said, stepping back. "Good night, Cade." She watched him walk away into the Copenhagen night, his figure growing smaller until he disappeared around a corner. Then she went up to her room and stood at the window, looking out at the city lights reflecting off the dark water. 6 months ago, she would have given anything to make sense of what happened between them. Now she understood that some things couldn't be made sense of, they could only be survived, integrated, transformed into scars that told the story of who you'd become. She thought about their father, brilliant and monstrous, destroying lives with casual cruelty. She thought about his children, scattered across the world, each carrying fragments of his genius and his damage. They couldn't change where they came from, but they could choose what they became. And that, Lena thought, was its own kind of victory. 3 years later, Lena published a groundbreaking paper on solar-wind interactions that restored her reputation completely. She was offered positions at prestigious universities around the world. She chose to stay in Oslo, where she'd built a life that felt authentically hers. She still attended the quarterly meetings with her half-siblings. They'd become a genuine support system. These people who understood her in ways no one else could. Cade had become a successful photographer, his work exploring themes of family and identity. They'd learned to be comfortable around each other, the romantic tension slowly transforming into something more sustainable, genuine sibling affection tinged with sadness for what could never be. One evening, after a particularly good therapy session in Prague, the 6 of them sat in a bar sharing stories and laughter. Lena excused herself to the restroom, and when she returned, she saw Cade talking to a woman at another table. She was laughing at something he'd said, her hand touching his arm. and Lena felt a sharp, unexpected pang of jealousy. She stopped in her tracks, processing the feeling with horrified recognition. After all this time, after everything, after building something healthy with their strange, damaged family, she still wanted him in ways she could never have him. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Some wounds, she understood in that moment, never healed at all. You just learned to live with them, to smile through the pain, to pretend that survival was the same as victory. Cade looked up and caught her eye, and something in his expression told her he knew exactly what she was feeling, because he felt it too, would always feel it. This twisted want that could never be satisfied, that would poison every other relationship they tried to build. Their father's final legacy, not just abandonment, not just damaged children scattered across the world, but this two people who'd found perfect understanding in each other and could never, ever act on it. Lena smiled at him across the bar, the smile bright and false, and he smiled back the same way. Both of them trapped in a prison their father had built before they were born. The bars made of DNA and terrible timing and choices neither of them could unmake. She returned to the table, ordered another drink, laughed at her sister's jokes, and pretended that everything was fine. And in the years that followed, she became very, very good at pretending. After all, she was Richard Morrison's daughter. Lying to yourself was in her blood.